Ladies, welcome to the final meeting of our program year. It has been an awesome year, and you know we are ending strong because that's what we do as the West Georgia chapter, the chapter of the year of the Georgia Association for Women Lawyers. Woo, everybody! I gotta tell you that we were all surprised. Amy will tell you, we sat down and we just pulled out the program, which was absolutely lovely. And then they just started flipping through it and like, have you seen the program? You gotta look at the program. So I sit down, and the first thing I see is Gall Chapter Year, West Georgia. Right? I didn't even look at the other things on here. So I'm deadly serious. And then Amy was like, did you see the rest of it though? And I was like, what am I missing? So my eyes went straight to Visionary Award. Ebony Phillips, long overdue, 100. Woo! And then they realized I still didn't see all of it. Like, and I know Amy was like, now you're a lawyer. I know you can read. What's up with you today, right? So then I went and I was like, Spotlight Award, Lanita Mitchell Blackwell. And I was like, oh my gosh, y'all, when I tell you West Georgia, clean sweep, that's for real. And that is because of us. There is nothing that can be done that is amazing, that is powerful and impactful in a vacuum alone. It takes a group of people on the same page of one accord. Danielle asked me about 6 months ago, Lanita, what will your legacy be? And I responded, you are my legacy. Didn't even know that this was in the wind. Didn't know that this was about to be manifested from the atmosphere. But this is exactly what happens when you focus on people and on the mission, which was the growth and professional development of women lawyers in our area. And we wound up being a blessing to the entire state. So thank you. And it's been my pleasure to serve as your president. And I mentioned Danielle's quote because how apropos that she is closing us down for the year with this amazing presentation on teen dating violence. Now, we are very familiar with Danielle, but if you would just be patient with me as I read her bio, because you need to know this woman of excellence who is committed to service and has been her entire life and how she get here. So just be patient as we go through. Attorney Danielle Simpson was raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota, at the intersection of 38th and Chicago, which is now referred to as George Floyd Square. She began her quest for juvenile justice in high school when her longtime friend since elementary school was murdered due to gang violence. She decided then she wanted a career in assisting young people in choosing successful pathways to adulthood. Danielle is passionate about community advocacy, education, and engagement, and lives a life that shows that. She attended North Dakota State University, where she received her Bachelor of Arts in Sociology, Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice, and minor in psychology. That girl is smart, y'all. She then worked in corrections as a family program director, where she assisted male inmates with learning to become better parents while incarcerated and after release. Danielle graduated with distinction from the University of North Dakota School of Law. While in law school, she worked for legal aid, where she represented clients seeking expungements, and the public defender's office. Danielle then moved to Atlanta, Georgia after law school to add that Black girl magic. Danielle served as the director of the Fulton County District Attorney's Office Citizens Court Watch program within the Community Prosecution Division for 4 years. She brought a unique perspective to the position, making court watch and prosecution more accessible on various social media platforms. She then became a Zone 1 community prosecutor in 2017, serving the English Avenue, Vine City area. She prosecuted repeat offenders in drug trafficking cases that devastated the long-standing communities in that area. Through her position as community prosecutor, Danielle saw a pattern of young offenders with little to no education, committing crimes that sent them to prison for many years. She then began working on a juvenile reform project that was aimed to have a restorative justice multidisciplinary approach to juvenile repeat offenders. She had always wanted to practice in her home county, Douglas, So when the juvenile prosecutor position became available in 2019, it was a perfect fit. And so in 2021, the current Douglas County District Attorney, Dahlia Racine, promoted Danielle to deputy chief over the juvenile division. She was directly impacting young people in her local community by finding innovative programs and solutions to address delinquent behavior and educating young people about the consequences of their choices in school, the community, online. Brought full circle. Danielle has a no-nonsense, straightforward attitude about keeping students in school and God sisters in line, finding services and treatment to fit children's needs, and providing protection to the community from dangerous offenders. In her free time, what is that? Danielle volunteers with various youth organizations. Her husband and her son, she and her husband, have one son and one dog baby. And she has been our member at large this year, helping to shape the podcast that was, I believe, the crowning jewel of our program year with the Women Who Lead series with our host, Ebony Phillips. The next voice you hear, please give a warm welcome to our very own Danielle Simpson. And forget the liberties I took with your bio. They know what was me and what was you. So
no, it was great. I was like, who wrote that? That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lenita. I really appreciate it. Everybody who's on right now are really friends. So I think we have a safe space to talk. I'm really glad to be here and be able to present on this topic. And Lenita's really pushed me forward in doing this, and Dahlia as well. And everybody who's on here has contributed. So I really appreciate it. So I'm just going to get started, and we'll start from the beginning here. I'm going to put a link in the chat, and that link is basically where you can go. We're just going to do a little bit of a poll to talk about, to get us started in regards to teen dating violence. And here you go. I'm going to share my screen. So basically what this is we are going to just tell me what you think of when you hear teen dating violence. So you go to the link, and it'll have a little box that you can start putting in words. Just put in 1 or 2 words in regards to what you think of when you hear of teen dating violence. The more things that pop up, it's going to kind of like have a little web. And so that's what we're going to do for just a second. Just keep as many as you can put in there. You can put in as many as you want, and then we'll see where we're at. And the more that people write the same things, the more that you're going to see those topics get bigger. So as we keep going, we have things such as unhealthy relationships, the verbal abuse, physical abuse, rape, sex, pain, school, STAD, control, puppy love, help, terror, trapped, pressure. Those are definitely great describers. We'll give it a couple seconds before we continue, see if there's anything else that pops up. We also see puppy love, that can be used when people are young people who are dating and this is their first dating experience. That's what people definitely hear as well. So I think those are all really great things to think of. The biggest word that I see here is fear. It can be definitely a scary thing. So I appreciate you guys for participating in that. And then I also just wanted to also give a trigger warning. This topic does include a lot of the things that are on the screen. So if those are things that you don't necessarily want to hear today, I would just definitely ask that you leave. I'm not going to feel any kind of way if you decide that you don't want to hear this presentation, because you do have to like protect yourself and your space. So here we go. I'll also share this again. There we go. All right. So we basically went through and we talked about that and we chatted about what teen dating violence is. I'm going to give you a little presentation to this is our roadmap. This is what we're going to talk about. If you are like me, you're on Zoom doing 15 other things. So like you do what you need to do. You got to send some emails, got to take some phone calls. I won't blame you. But the two things I do really want to make sure that everyone hears at the start of this, because I know sometimes we can get a lot long and drawn on, is one, teen dating violence definitely impacts a multitude of people, all sorts of races, religions, people who are in different, same-sex partnerships and heterosexual sexual orientation. It does not discriminate in regards to your wealth. I mean, everyone can go through it. And number two, I think that is really important, is it really does start at home. And the statistics and data does show that, like, if we are to consider how we're going to treat teen dating violence, it actually is really family therapy, because it's a learned behavior in some sense of it. And so what we're going to talk about today is the definition. We're going to talk about the problem, solution. We're going to have a case study, and then I'm going to get out of here. And I'm going to talk really fast so that we can all, because I know we all have other things to do, and I really appreciate everyone being here. So what is teen dating violence? It's intimate partner violence, and that's different than domestic violence. That's kind of the language or rhetoric that we used before, but we're talking about intimate partners. Domestic violence can be anybody who's at home, but this is your intimate relationships that you're having. It occurs between two young people who are or were once in a relationship. So you also do need to kind of think about past partners. So when people break up, that's still considered to be intimate partner violence, and they're in an intimate relationship together. It is considered an ACE, which is a term that we use in juvenile, which is adverse childhood experience. So it's a traumatic event that definitely affects millions of young people. And ACEs are things that we look at to see and determine how someone is going to grow up as an adult, because they've had these adverse childhood things that have happened to them and the trauma that it's affected. And it includes physical violence, sexual violence, psychological aggression, and stalking. So we'll talk about that as well. And I'm hoping that this video works. Let me see if you guys can hear it. Can you hear the volume?
So romantic.
Yes.
Really
Okay.
buying me flowers and treating me to dinner. He was so sweet and very protective. He just wanted to make sure I was safe. He's so cool. Sometimes he calls me names, but everyone does that.
She texted me constantly, wondering where I was or who I was hanging out with. It's nice to be loved so much.
I'm lucky to have someone totally dedicated to me. Sometimes I feel trapped.
She hit me, but she apologized right after.
You forced me to. Is it really my fault? You pushed me, but you do that all the time.
She spat in my face, but she apologized after. She choked me, but she was just angry.
You punched me in my face.
She hit me, she slapped me.
You pushed me down.
She texted
Just
me
wanted to make sure I was
constantly.
safe.
She called
Said
me
he was
names.
sorry.
She said she was sorry.
Said he was sorry. I love him.
She loves me. I love her.
So I really appreciate that video. I think, oops, sorry, hold on one second. One of the things I really like about that video is it doesn't discriminate between female and male. So that's one of the things that we do need to make sure that we're considering, is that males can also be victims in that case. And sometimes it may look a little different, but sometimes it doesn't. So there's still physical, verbal, and sexual abuse that can happen. So physical violence, again, is when someone is trying to physically hurt a partner, hitting, kicking, using another type of physical force. What we see a lot of the times with teen dating violence is it starts with other objects. So they may throw things they might not hit you, but they may throw things at the wall, and then it escalates to throwing things at you in your direction. And then it might even go to actually throwing things at you or hitting you. One of the things I also think of is that whenever there is strangulation that is introduced, that escalates things drastically. So once somebody is willing to, cut or restrict your airflow, that can lead to murder. Also, guns and weapons. If somebody's willing to introduce or pull a handgun, they're likely to also use that same weapon. So that also increases the likelihood of very serious violent injuries as well. We also have sexual violence. This is something that I think that is difficult to talk about with young people depending on the setting, but it's really good to talk about your kids with it, because I think that, me growing up personally, I felt like if you were in a relationship, then the answer to sex was always yes. That's what I was told. And where did I get my information from? Other peers. So when we're talking about sexual violence and intimate partner violence and teen dating, this is like a really strange time for them. There's hormones flowing, everybody's thinking about sex, talking about sex, but then they're also not understanding the part of it that's the violence of it, which is basically forcing them to participate in it, talking about sexual acts, or basically what consent is. And consent has to be given even if you're in a dating relationship. And then also, it also includes non-physical sexual behaviors. We see a lot of like what you would think of as like revenge porn, posting sexual photos without their consent, something that you sent consensually to your boyfriend or girlfriend, and then all of a sudden is being shared or on social media. That's still also considered sexual violence as well. And then there's psychological aggression. This is a little bit of a longer video, but it talks, I'm going to play it for a little bit because it does talk about warning signs of emotional abuse. And I think this is basically the start. A lot of people have emotional abuse before they ever have physical abuse. And we don't necessarily consider that to be abuse. So someone's like, well, he doesn't hit me, but he does all of these other things. And we don't necessarily consider that. And we might not talk about it because it doesn't seem like something that we know. And so this is also some warning signs that can be looked at as well. And these are the use of verbal and nonverbal communication in a way to harm them and basically exert control over a partner. So I'll play this for a little bit.
Hey Psych2Goers, first off, now let's begin the video. Have you ever wondered if you've suffered emotional abuse? The American Psychological Association defines emotional abuse as a pattern of behavior wherein someone repeatedly and deliberately harms another's mental health and overall well-being through non-physical acts. Emotional abuse is harder to spot than physical abuse because the psychological markers of it are made less obvious. So, here are 7 warning signs of emotional abuse. 1. They're overly critical of you. Have you ever been overly criticized in a relationship with a friend, family member, or romantic partner? Do they make you feel like you couldn't do anything right? In an emotionally abusive relationship, the abuser repeatedly insults you, even after you've asked them to stop. Or they hold you to impossibly high standards and then depreciate you when you don't measure up to those too high standards. They might often swear or yell at you, even when outside of an argument. They use critical or threatening words to make you break down or begin to doubt yourself. 2. They intentionally humiliate you. Has an emotional abuser ever intentionally embarrassed you or made you feel ashamed? Have they said things to you like, I'm the only one who could ever love you, or you'll never find someone as good as me? Emotional abusers may use humiliation as a tactic in ways like degrading comments about your appearance, intelligence, or personal success. Small insults and slights towards you can negatively impact your self-esteem when they're constantly repeated back to you. Emotional abusers will take advantage of this as a way to convince you to maintain your relationship with them. This is all a harmful tactic to keep you tied down to them. Number 3, they purposefully intimidate you. You find yourself complying with the demands of a close relationship because you fear the consequences of disagreeing with the other person.
Danielle, the volume just went
Number
out.
4,
Oh,
Sorry.
there it is.
they mean to isolate you. Has an emotional abuser ever isolated you from your friends and family? This person will try to isolate you from the people who care about you. They don't want others in your circle to pick up on the warning signs of abuse. You might threaten to end the relationship if the other person expresses a desire to visit with the other person, or block new friendly relations. 5. They reject you. Do they physically distance themselves from you or suddenly become emotionally unavailable? This is another method of enacting control over you through the power of rejection. When you're unexpectedly cut off from their support, it stirs up a sense of insecurity and self-blame. When you're isolated, you're also dependent on them for emotional support. And when they grow cold towards you, it can leave you spinning. Another example of this is called public rejection, where they ignore you in public or around friends and family as a form of punishment. Number 6, they want to exploit you. Does this person call you for every trivial problem? Do they ask you for favors that you don't feel comfortable doing? The exploitation phase of emotional abuse is characterized by them reaching out to you only to use you. They do little for you in return and become emotionally unavailable when the tables turn and you need them for something. And number 7, they have a harmful level of control over you. Has someone in your life ever tried to control everything you do? Maybe it was a helicopter parent or a partner in a relationship. Even though it may come off as well-intentioned, it crosses the line when they start to micromanage your life and refuse to listen or talk with you about your personal goals. Emotional abusers can make you dependent on them for any decision, big or small. They'll gaslight you, manipulate you, and in turn leave you questioning your own judgment. You find yourself scared that making a seemingly harmless decision will anger the other person. It's likely that you're dealing with emotional abuse in that relationship. Knowing and recognizing the signs of emotional abuse is the first step to helping yourself if you're in an abusive relationship.
So I think I really like this video and these 7 warning signs, because I think that we all can think of potentially, or hopefully not, a relationship where there's one of those, or you can think of even friendships or, other type of relationships that you may have that are not intimate, that those things may have happened. And those are a lot of the warning signs that we ignore. Right. And I say we just as a society, like there's just some of those things that we may not be looking and listening to. And so when those things happen, those are the red flags that, we need to be able to kind of perk up and see that this could actually go further. Let's see. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the problem, about intimate partner violence, or IPV. It does affect millions of people in the United States. And also there's a lot of data from this National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey. And what that indicates, again, this is really staggering numbers, that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men have experienced sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner during their lifetime. That's a lot. That's a lot of people that have experienced this and could be victims. We'll talk a little bit about how that ends up showing up later in regards to teens and like how they move through life as in college or as adults, but that is a really big number for it to be 1 in 4. Now, I don't do math out loud, so don't ask me. However, even for the people who are here today, that's probably about 2 people. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more in the case study about my personal experience with it. But so just kind of to keep that in mind in regards to the numbers of people that are facing these type of issues. So we also have over 43 million women and 38 million men who experience psychological aggression by an intimate partner in their lifetime. It starts very early and can continue through the lifespan. And then we also kind of talked about it already, but people who are in certain communities that have inequities, also if they're marginalized communities as far as like your gender, minority, they're at greater risk of experiencing it, and also a greater numbers that it happens. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. And then in adolescence, like we talked about, the intimate partner violence is called teen dating violence, or TDV, and nearly 1 in 11 female teens and 1 in 14 male high school students report having experienced physical dating violence in the last year. That is a lot. That's a lot of people, a lot of teenagers that are suffering from this as well. And me personally, I don't feel like we talk about it enough. And then you also have 1 in 8 females and 1 in 26 male high school students that experience sexual dating violence in the last year. And 26% of women and 15% of men experience intimate partner violence for the first time before they're 18. So before they're 18 and they're actually trying to figure out life, figure out where they want to go to college and what do they want to be. And we kind of like ask our 5 and 6 years old, what do you want to do? And they say, I want to be a firefighter. Well, before they actually are 18, that's a big percentage of them that are actually going to experience intimate partner violence. And it's something that we're not really discussing. So we're just going to run through what healthy relationships look like. We've kind of talked about that already. So that's individuality. We really should be, and I know I have a 14-year-old, so we're talking about that a lot as well, that you get to be, well, he says he has a quote girlfriend. We talked and defined about what a girlfriend is and what that means, which is basically they just walk each other to class and hang out, which is appropriate. But so for me, we're talking a lot about individuality. Shouldn't be completely thrust into your partner's life and what they have going on and what they're doing. Like my son is really big into baseball. So you shouldn't give up baseball just because your girlfriend has something else going on. You do need to make sure an individual. They had an 8th grade dance and we were talking about you have to spend time with your friends and your friends group as well as time with your quote unquote girlfriend. So you should have individuality. You should have positive and good communication. There should be understanding, should have self-confidence. You guys should always be building yourselves up and not tearing each other down. You should be able to express opinions freely, being a role model for each other, being respectful to each other as well. Like treat them how you would want someone to treat your sibling. Or I said, if you had a sister, how would you want someone to treat your sister? That's how you should treat your partner. And then also like we also as adults can model good behavior. You should have positive relationships with your spouses, with your family. There should be multiple other sources for kids to see as far as positive relationships that model all of these things that we're talking about so that they have examples of it. They kind of have to see it play out in real life. And even talking to my son, I may say like me and your dad, we don't argue and we don't cut below the belt. We're not saying words, we're fighting fair. We don't say things that are going to hurt each other. We're not malicious with the words that we're saying, although we may argue. And so that shows also like healthy boundaries and taking time out. And we're working on having good relationships and healthy relationships as a mother and son, just like we would any other relationship as well. So mutual respect, trust, honesty, compromise, controlling your anger. How do we take a deep breath? How do we count to 10? How do we take a step back? And like I said, fighting fair and problem solving. And unhealthy relationships, like we talked about and saw in the videos, is control and hostility, being dishonest. We talk a lot about that too with a lot of our young people. Like if someone is willing to lie and steal, why would you think that they wouldn't in your relationship? A lot of disrespect, dependency. I think that's a really big for a lot of teenagers. They just feel like that's the only person who gets me. And then they start to shelter themselves. They start to push themselves away from other groups. And in these unhealthy relationships, that's what the person who is the person who you would say is the offender in the relationship, that's what they want. They want you to be completely dependent on them. So they may push you away from your other groups and things like that. Intimidation, physical violence, and sexual violence, which we talked about and described. So most people know what the cycle of abuse looks like. Again, you start basically at the bottom. So like, why would teenagers or just people in general stay in very unhealthy or violent relationships? Well, it starts with a lot of tension. It doesn't start with necessarily a slap. It may start with insults, threats, accusations. Teenagers, a lot of the time, will accuse each other of you talk to so-and-so or you're flirting with someone else. And then you kind of are on the defense and you might be defensive also, like accusing that other person. So accusations are flying. They breed in that ground of like, teen drama in high school. And then you have this explosion that happens, like we talked about, throwing things, slamming doors, destructing property. If somebody's willing to like break your phone, key your car, those are things that they'll do at the beginning of this physical restraint, verbal assault. And then you have a break. So we'll talk a little bit more about it, but that breakup to makeup, a couple that's like constantly breaking up and they're constantly getting back together because they're in the middle of this cycle. And then you have your honeymoon phase, which is apologies, promising to change, gifts, compliments in a period of calm before that tension starts again. And then we just continue round and round. So again, the impact of teen dating violence that we should look at, it does have really long-term and short-term effects. Lots of teenagers will experience depression, anxiety. They'll have they'll start to engage in unhealthy behaviors. They'll start to use illegal substances. They may lie, they may steal, they may bully other people. So they're going through something themselves and now they're also bullying others. They may think about self-harm. And then it also really does set the stage for problems in the future, because now let's say like you've experienced teen dating violence in high school and then you go to college. Well, now you don't have your parents. You don't have people who are necessarily looking out for you, who are watching the signs and symptoms that you may have. You may start to go down in your grades. You may start skipping class, and there isn't someone like in high school, like that everybody gets from Infinite Campus notice that your child has missed school. There's none of that. You're kind of on your own. And that also can lead to intimate partner violence relationships in the future, even as an adult. So again, they're at a higher risk of victimization during college, and it still has long-lasting effects with intimate partner violence as adults as well. So how are we going to stop it? Like I talked about before, you have to teach and talk about healthy relationship skills. You have to talk to kids. Like, it's just what it is. Like, do I always want to talk to my 14-year-old? No. Does my 14-year-old really want to talk to me? Probably absolutely not, but we have to, and it's uncomfortable, and you just got to do what you have to, and you have to talk about it as well. But I also do, which the second prong is also engaging influential adults. There's a lot of people that my child can talk to reach out who isn't me, because of course, like, I'm the bad guy. But there's all sorts of like coaches, there's peers, there's other people, that are adults that he may feel comfortable being able to talk to. One of his baseball coaches and his batting coach talks to him consistently. Of course, does he report back to me? Yes, he does. But, they do spend a lot of time actually just like talking to each other, getting to know each other, and, talking about these things. And those are red flags that other people may be able to see that I'm not privy to. Also creating a protective environment. We'll talk a little bit about this in my experience, but making sure that your home is a safe environment, that it feels like a safe space. The thing about kids in this day and age is that when they go to school and they face a bully, that bully is going to carry on through social media and the internet and phones when you get home. So like, there isn't always necessarily a safe space, where it's like, if I was being bullied back in the day, I could go home and find some kind of release and some way to feel safe. But that isn't always the case, because now we have technology that follows us wherever we go. And then of course, monitoring your children. That's the number one thing that I'm going to say can really stop some of this. Your children have no privacy rights. They do not get to have privacy rights. You got to monitor them. You have to look through their phone. You have to look through their social media. The amount of parents that come to court and say, I had no clue what they were doing and what they were looking at, or that this was even an issue, is alarming. I have an app that's on my son's phone. It's called Guardian, where I basically can look at, I don't do it all the time, but I get a lot of safety alerts. So if he's talking about something in particular, if it's sex or drugs or bullying or some of those things, there's alerts that can be set up where I'm getting notifications. Or if there's inappropriate photos that are being sent, if there's websites that are being visited. You can call me a helicopter parent, and that's fine. However, a lot of these are really great ways to have conversations. Like, I don't walk up to him and say, like, you said this. I'm like, me and my husband are like, all right, like, we got to talk about some things. This is something that was brought up in these text messages that I should probably have a conversation about. And so sometimes it's even just about other people and who's your friend, or, we get information if they're changing contacts in their phone. When he was younger, we had to have a big discussion about sharing information online. And, all of a sudden he's like, oh, well, that's my Fortnite Roblox friend, but you don't know them, and that they're not the same age that you think they are. So the biggest thing I can say is really monitoring that, because if you start to see some of those behaviors and some of that conversation, that might be a really good way for you to interject. And then, of course, having supporting survivors, making sure that we're offering services, counseling. I'm really trying to my best in normalizing therapy. I have a therapist. My therapist has helped me go through this presentation and making sure that I'm talking about it in a way that is helpful to me and not harmful to others. But again, the family therapy is also really key because it really does start at home, and providing resources. So here, I'll go back real quick. So what do I do if someone discloses teen dating violence? This is where I was going to tell you about my friend. We'll call her Tina. When I was in school with Tina, she was like suffering from teen dating violence. She was a victim of it. And so we're supposed to listen without judging. We're supposed to tell them you believe them, that it's not their fault, see if they want to talk about it, really. And then the last part that I think is so key is then making sure that you're telling them to talk to a parent, guardian, or trusted adult. When I was in high school, I did not do this well. Tina was blue and black and bloodied and constantly coming to me for aid. And I didn't know how to do all of this. Like, yes, did I listen to her? But then there was also a part of me that was really naive that thought, well, if this is happening to her, what did she do? And that's not fair. That wasn't fair to me to say, and that wasn't my place. And then also really connecting her with an adult. I never connected her with an adult because we thought we could handle it. And every Disney TV show shows you that like all the kids are figuring out some like big thing together and they don't need any adult supervision or help, but they do. So how are we going to be able to make sure that we're connecting teenagers to the right adults that are going to be able to keep them safe? So this is our case study. This is me. This is me in high school. This is at prom. So I'm going to tell you about my relationship and my experience with teen dating violence. This is Roger, is not his real name. We started dating when I was a freshman. We met like 8th grade year, turning into high school. So we started very young. This was my first high school dating experience, period. We were both in sports. Roger was in football, wrestling, and track. I did cheerleading, basketball, and softball, figure skating, some other stuff. We both had history of intimate partner violence. My mom was a victim of intimate partner violence that I saw, and his family as well, which he saw his own family deal with it. And then I also saw his family deal with it as well. And so I'm working, I have pretty decent grades, and I have large friend groups. We date on and off that makeup to breakup I told you about. Like, you really didn't know if we were together or we weren't. Every other day it was something like maybe we were together, maybe we weren't. We started a sexual relationship towards the tail end of my high school career, and then we end up going to college in the same state. So my situation definitely started with emotional abuse, like the 7 signs we talked about. He was very critical. He told me that I wasn't attractive. That's still something that I deal with on a consistent basis. Like, am I attractive? Am I pretty? Those things. Like, if I ask my husband one more time if he finds me attractive, he's probably going to scream. But I still deal with that, right? He definitely would humiliate me. There were times that we were at certain sporting events. I was not the best basketball player, but I loved basketball. And I would sit on the bench a lot. And right at the end of the game, in front of like all my friends, coaches, and staff, he berated me about how I didn't get enough playing time and that it was embarrassing to come to his games and I was not a great athlete. It was clearly humiliating. There was a lot of intimidation factors. Like, I had to learn how to be compliant. I had to learn what he liked and what he didn't like, and I couldn't cross those boundaries. None of this has anything to do with physical, right? Like, none of these things are physical. Isolation with friends. My family did not like him. My friends did not like him. And so my friends basically felt like I was making a bad decision, and they basically distanced themselves, which he was then able to use as like, look at your friends that don't support you and they don't care about you. And so he made my bubble just me and him. And then also, rejection that they talked about in the video. There were days that he wouldn't talk to me at school. He would just completely ignore me, which left me in a tailspin trying to figure out how I was going to be able to do better, to win back that relationship, although I didn't do anything wrong. Also, the exploitive part of it as well was as soon as I was able to drive, I was mandated to pick him up and drop him off and take him to school. I was supposed to help with his homework. I was supposed to attend all of his sporting events. And that's what a good quote unquote girlfriend did. So even though I had my own sporting events, I was supposed to figure out a way to make sure that I was at all of his, which meant rushing from my game in order to go to a different game and sit there for hours with maybe little to no food, maybe nothing to drink. And then also all of those things kind of lead to control. This then increased to physical abuse, where we talked about hitting other things, throwing things at the wall, throwing things not at me. And so then a lot of people are like, but he doesn't hit you. But all of these things are unhealthy relationships. These are all boundaries that have been violated, but you're not necessarily putting your hands on me. And then of course, like we talked about with sexual abuse, there was this requirement to have sex. Once that part of the relationship started, if there was no option to me saying no. So that's basically how it started. You can kind of see how it escalates from the beginning until the end. And then the other part too, I don't really remember any adults or parents that I talked to. There weren't a lot of adults that were asking me the questions to identify the red flags, but I definitely wasn't telling my parents. I wasn't really telling adults. Some teachers, I think, had some concerns. I don't remember them telling my parents, but they did provide me a safe space. Like lunchtime in the cafeteria ended up being like a time of like tension, because there were so many requirements placed on me as to like what I was supposed to do, where I was supposed to be. And so I was able to go to, again, I don't do math. Math is my worst subject, but my math teacher said I could go and hang out in her classroom and eat lunch every day, every single day. My senior year of high school, I ate lunch there because it was a safe space for me. And then again, I attempted to move to college and go to North Dakota and move away from the situation. And he ended up moving to a city that was nearby. So now I'm in college, and I think for good measure, my parents really tried. So their idea was like, we won't give her a car, so she can't go visit him. And I understand that. And I think that they were trying to do something about it. However, it just made it more difficult, because now I was still required, just as always, to come and visit and to stay there. But then I didn't have a car when I wanted to leave. And there was no Uber, there was no Lyft. So I'm like stuck in that certain situation. And I refuse police involvement. I think that's one of the things that I definitely regret, is not using the resources that I had. But I think being in North Dakota as a Black woman and a Black man was really fearful in as far as like police encounters and what that was going to look like. And there was like a little bit of guilt in that as well. Like, what would happen if I called the police? What kind of trouble would there be in? What kind of resources would I even have? And so what makes me different? Absolutely nothing. So that's the whole point. I mean, I consider myself to be pretty cute, and I consider myself to be fairly smart. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, like, I'm sitting in front of you and sharing my story as a testament to it really can happen to anyone. And that it doesn't really matter. And even if you think more about intimate partner violence and teen dating with same-sex relationships, so there's also that piece of being in the closet and being scared to share your sexuality. That increases the likelihood that teenagers are going to suffer from dating violence, because now they have this other piece that is really scary and frightful. And then they're also suffering in the same ways that a heterosexual relationship would, but it's like exacerbated, I think the other thing too is I had a lot of protective factors. So I was in positive peer activities, although those kind of like tapered off. I was a decent student, but my grades did drop. I had a lot of friends, I had a lot of support systems. So there were little pockets of time and places that I could figure it out. Or by the time I was a senior, I was like dually enrolled in college. And that was an amazing outlet for me, because I wasn't in the school for majority of the day. So that also provided some things. So those are some of the protective factors. And I think that also sharing with others is really important, like how we're going to make this work. When I went to this darkness to light training by Judge Walker, when I first got here to Douglas, told me to go to this darkness to light training, and basically was talking about how adults can protect kids from sexual abuse and trauma. And so during that presentation, one of the things that they said was, you need to write down 10 kids that you impact, 10 kids that you have relationships with that it doesn't have to be your kids, but I thought about my cousins, my husband's kids and family members, my son's best friends. I made this list. And so with that list of people are kids that you do have an impact on. So you have to share information, even if it's not directly your children that came out of your body, but other kids that are like in your circle and in your community for some reason, we have to be able to share that information so that they can understand. So I share my experience with it, so then that way you can kind of see all of the stuff that we talked about and how it manifested in my teen years and what it looked like for me. So I'm just going to put up like some resources, national resources, local resources. I can send these as well if anyone is interested, but that's pretty much it. Are there any questions?
Danielle, that was absolutely amazing. I think I speak for, if not everybody, but most of us in saying your bravery, your transparency is exactly what we need at a time such as this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I echo those sentiments, but I do have a question. Will you put in the chat the monitoring thing on the phone that you use?
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
I will do that.
There was a slide that you had. It was the pattern of abuse, the circle. Do you mind going back to that, please?
Yes. I might have spelled guardian wrong. Please don't judge me. I can't spell either. I don't spell out loud and I don't do math. So here's
yes, that. So during this cycle of abuse, I know that there's no best or better time to, once you see something, to break it, but are there more times that are more dangerous than others to try to intervene?
I think that's a great question. I think that I don't think there's any bad time to intervene. I think if you start to see the tension start to rise, I think that's a great time to intervene. Once you see the explosion, and if you're privy to seeing it, or if somebody is explaining that to you, I think that's also a great time. You might get a little bit of pushback in that break because somebody is also saying like, no, we broke up, right? Like me and Roger are constantly breaking up, and someone comes and says like, hey, I don't think that relationship is really good for you. Well, we broke up. So that doesn't necessarily matter anymore. But it's not a bad time also before you see that honeymoon phase and you start to see the apologies and you start to, if you're witnessing it, if you're a friend to it, if it's you or someone else, I don't think there's really any bad time to like intervene. I think you just have to be mindful when it's in that explosion period that things are violent, and the person who is intervening might also, receive threats themselves, right? Because the whole purpose is to eventually, to maintain that control. So if you're a parent, if you're a friend, if you're someone else, they are all, that's a barrier to them trying to control you, right?
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? I feel like I'm doing so great on time. Okay, so anyways, I just wanted to also just really send like special thank yous to this presentation. My elected official, Dahlia, who's the DA, Amber Robinson, she just left, unfortunately, like literally before this. She was like, bye, it's my last day. But she was my trial partner, Jasmine Moore, who was my friend and also legal citizen. She helped me with this presentation. Jennifer Walker is my therapist. So we were able to do a lot of being able to do a lot of like, what's the word? Sorry, I'm like losing it right now. But we were able to basically talk about this presentation, and we knew it was coming up. And then we were basically finding resources and things and ways for me to feel comfortable and sharing it and processing it and things like that. So that was really helpful. And of course, the women in Gall, like Lenita, Ebony, Angel, Amy, everyone, Miranda, I think she's here, but everybody at Gall, I really appreciate the opportunity to share this information and to have this platform to speak on it.
Thank you so very much, Danielle, for your time. Ladies, can we give her a hand? For those of you who can't get on, just put the little emoji with the hands clapping. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Awesome. I want to read this from Miranda in the chat. Hi all, thank you Danielle for presenting today and sharing your story, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. I have to jump off the call, but I wanted to touch base. We will be planning some big things for the fall and look forward to seeing all of you when we kick off 22-23 Gall in August. So that is for our new president, our incoming president. We are going to go ahead and do the installation of new officers. Miranda was actually installed Saturday night, so she's good to go, but we have some other officers who are serving this year. So Angel Riley, who is our vice president, and Amy Sohani, who is our treasurer, no, secretary this time. If you would, ladies, if you could come off mute for just a moment as we do the oath for installation. All right. If you would, in the presence of this company here assembled, please, for the rest of this moment, just repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Angela Riley,
Do solemnly promise and pledge
do
Do
solemnly
solemnly
promise
promise and pledge
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office
to the best of my knowledge and ability.
to the best of my knowledge and ability.
Congratulations, ladies. And it is officially my last moment as president. Thank you all so very much for this amazing year. Gall Talk, our newsletter, will be coming out next week. Just recapping the last 6 months. You'll be hearing from Miranda and the rest of the leadership team for the planning for next year. It has been my honor, and you all have a fantastic weekend.